New today, a Wall Street Journal analysis finds the coalition that propelled President Trump to victory is falling apart. An aggregate of polling shows the groups that swung toward Trump in 2024, including young and non-white voters, are now souring over his handling of the economy. Here's what lawmakers from both sides said today about Trump's responsibility.
There's just no doubt that it was Donald Trump who added more to the deficit than any president in the history of the country, and he is on pace to do it for a second time. It's going to crater the economy. And listen, it won't have an impact on his billionaire friends. His Mar-a-Lago crowd will come out all right.
We have gotten rich off of trade, all Americans, and it is lifting all boats, and we are richer than we have ever been in any time in our history. But it's not easy to convince people of that because there are short-term problems where you have inflation, like during the last 4 years, where the middle class actually did lose purchasing power and did get poorer.
And back with me, Shaniqua McClendon and Carlos Curbelo. Thank you guys for sticking around. So, Shaniqua, the WSJ finds that Trump's approval ratings have declined across all demographics, even among his most ardent supporters, and after he made gains among Black, Hispanic, young voters in the November election. Do you attribute this mostly to Trump's lower marks on handling the economy? And can he reverse this anytime soon as his tariffs are taking effect?
Yeah, I do attribute this to, I won't call it work, I don't know, the decimation that he's put in place for the economy. A lot of people who voted for Donald Trump, especially, some of the new people we saw vote for Donald Trump, are not pleased. They are not better off. He said on day one he was going to fix the economy. And on top of that, we have 3.5 more years for that to all sink in for folks, and they're not going to see things get better. So I think people will continue to be disappointed. But I think who this is really a problem for is not Donald Trump. It's congressional Republicans in the House and Senate who are going to have to go up for re-election in 2026 and 2028. And Donald Trump had a certain amount of appeal for these voters to come out, and he's not going to be on the ballot anymore. So I think they're going to have to carry the brunt of this, but also not have the charisma to get them out.
Carlos, the analysis finds that white men without a four-year college degree, they're the only group whose support for Trump remains strong. Is there time for Trump to change voters' initial and often, stunning impressions of his presidency? Does a Republican candidate in 2028 even have a chance of winning, to Shaniqua's point, without the coalition that Trump put together?
Well, no, Alex. Without the Trump voters, it will be difficult for Republicans in swing districts and swing states to keep their seats. Now, the interesting part of all of this is that a lot of the issues that Donald Trump has had, the reason why some of these people who joined his coalition are now frustrated, these are self-inflicted wounds, and Senator Paul put his finger on it in his statement that you just ran. This tariff experiment, number one, it meant that Donald Trump was taking full ownership of the economy, an economy that he had criticized just a few months before as a candidate. And number two, the tariff experiment was destabilizing, and it introduced a lot of uncertainty into the economy. Now, he can fix this. He could reverse all of this, but it doesn't seem like he's willing to do that.
Error, and the fact that this thing got tanked in the budget committee really really sends a hard signal to both Speaker Johnson and the president.
Joe.
Well, and I was going to say, Ali brought it up at the lead. Underlying this entire discussion are the tariffs. The utter destruction and madness that Trump has wreaked on the economy with the tariff yo-yo of the last couple of months. It's having an impact on the economy. It's having an impact on the Republican Party base, and these Republican members of Congress need to deal with that. You mentioned Walmart came out and said, we're going to raise prices because of Trump's tariffs. And what does that baby, that crybaby in the White House do this morning? He goes after Walmart. And Ali, think about it. What a weak loser thing to do. You bully a private company that just talks about the impact of his tariffs. What a loser thing to do. Why? Donald Trump believes in tariffs. Why doesn't he just own his tariffs? But no, instead he goes after the private companies who are doing what we all knew they would have to do.
Well, some days he goes after he embraces it. He says you just can have $3 as opposed to 30. The dolls are coming from Walmart. Charlie, one of the interesting things that Don and I talked about, and it's got you all have something in common. Obviously, when we think about Nebraska, we think about agriculture, but Pennsylvania and Illinois are both states that sell a lot of agriculture to the world. And when we talk about tariffs, we think about stuff coming in and the prices we pay. But these tariffs, when you impose them on countries, including China, they then impose tariffs on American agricultural exports. We are a net exporter of agriculture in this country. This is a big issue for farmers.
Of course it is. And think of yourself as a soybean farmer out in a place like, Iowa or Illinois. And much of their soybeans do get exported to places like, China.
Yep.
And also, by the way, Europe has a 0% tariff on soybeans. And so we always exported to Europe as well. But then Donald Trump smacked the European Union with a major tariff. I forgot it was 20 or 25%. Well, guess what the Europeans did? They turned around and hit soybeans. So if you're a soybean grower, you're going to lose market share not only in China, but in Europe. And much of what our farmers sell, like soybeans and pork, for example, those can be more easily substituted in a place like China than many of the things that the Chinese sell us. So this is a disaster for American agriculture. And by the way, with these tariffs at 10% at the very least, this will absolutely be inflationary. Trump can go ahead and blame Walmart or any retailer for raising prices, but this is going to have a real impact. And he can't just tell people to eat it. Nobody believes for a second that the country that's doing the exporting pays the tariff. It's absurd. Yep. I mean, that noise you hear is Wharton wanting their degree back from Donald Trump for saying it. But it's an absurdity. And everybody knows it. And even though that we have a temporary truce with the Chinese, it's only 90 days. And again, the rates are still much higher, though, than when we began on the Liberation Day.
Joe, I think if go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, Allie, how crazy, right? Because Donald Trump has been telling us from day one, China's paying for this stuff. China's paying for these tariffs. So why would Trump even go after companies for raising prices? Companies, I thought, weren't paying for these.
Yeah, the Chinese are paying for the tariffs the same way the Mexicans are paying for the wall. We've figured all of that out not to be true. I will say, great having you guys here, because I think if Charlie and Joe and Don Bacon and I were around a table discussing the budget, we would all sort of disagree on a few things, but at least we'd be talking about it and we'd figure something out. Guys, thanks as always for being on the show. I appreciate it. Charlie, give me my jacket back. Former Republican Congressman Charlie Dent of Pennsylvania and Joe Walsh of Illinois. All right, coming up, Stacey Abrams sparked a movement when she ran for governor in her state of Georgia.
A significant setback for President Trump's immigration agenda at the Supreme Court. In a 7-2 decision, the justices blocked the Trump administration from using a law that's only been used before during wartime to deport a group of immigrants in Texas. Now, we're talking about the 1798 Alien Enemies Act. The government has been trying to use the wartime law to speed up deportations. The ruling says that the immigrants need more than 24 hours notice to exercise due process. Justices Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas dissented. We should note the decision is only temporary. The justices sent the case back to a federal appeals court. After the ruling, President Trump wrote on social media, "The Supreme Court of the United States is not allowing me to do what I was elected to do." He added, "Thank you to Justice Alito and Justice Thomas for attempting to protect our country. This is a bad and dangerous day for America." Joining me now is CNN senior legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Ellie Honig. How big a loss is this one for the Trump administration?
Yeah, this really hurts the Trump administration. And if you need proof of that, look no farther than the president's wounded statement after the fact. When you read this opinion, Anderson, the language is much sharper than you usually see from the ordinarily genteel justices. And really, a couple things come through to me. Number one, they are fed up. The justices are fed up with the way the Trump administration's been handling immigration. And two, there is a loss of trust from the Supreme Court, minus Justices Alito and Thomas, but the other 7 justices towards the Trump administration. This is now the second time that the Supreme Court has said all of these Alien Enemies Act deportations are on hold. because you are not giving people enough notice, because you've played fast and loose, sending planes out in the middle of hearings. And they even cite the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case, the court does, and they say, we don't want to risk a situation where you do what you did with Abrego Garcia, where you send him out of the country and then tell us, sorry, your honors, he's gone, nothing we can do about it. So this is a really sharp setback.
So this heads back to an appeals court. What's likely to happen? So
what the Supreme Court has said is no deportations until we work out, first of all, exactly what the due process will be. And second of all, the Supreme Court is making clear here that ultimately they are going to have to rule on whether the Alien Enemies Act applies to this. The act, as you said, it's a 1798 act. It's only previously been used in wartime. The question is the presence of this gang an invasion or a predatory incursion? A district court judge Trump appointed said last week, no, it does not count. That question is definitely heading up to the Supreme Court. I think they're skeptical. I think they're going to strike it down.
All right, Ellie Honig, stick around.
Tariffs. The president responded saying Walmart ate billions last year. It should, quote, eat the tariffs. Walmart says 90% of American households rely on it for a range of products. So big picture, is this a battle that Trump can win in the eyes of the public?
Absolutely not. I grew up in a low-income household, and we grocery shopped and got a lot of things from Walmart. And I can't imagine what it would have done to our household if those prices had gone up. And I know what my mother would have thought if those prices had gone up because the president just decided it was a good idea. Walmart has said that they will eat some of these tariffs for a bit, but I don't think that's going to last long. They're a private company who have shareholders, and they have to be, responsible to them. And at the end of the day, their job is to make money, and they're not going to be able to do that if they're picking up his slack for making poor decisions.
Last word to you, Carlos, on Walmart versus Trump.
For all of my Republican friends who have bashed socialism, myself included, for a very long time, an American president telling a company what kind of pricing they should set, how much money they should make, how much in profits they should deliver to their shareholders.
What you have here, at the end of the day, more than anything else, is a question. Can Trump and the GOP recover from this? And I don't know if they can. I don't know. Because a couple things. One, all of what's happening is in direct opposition to Trump's mandate, right? Like, we understand that, don't we? Like, I'm like this sometimes because it's taken forever, but I think people are getting it now. This isn't like, for example, Trump said he was going to lower prices. Didn't say how. Everything he said that was indicative of actually increasing them, like his tariffs. But let's say the prices weren't skyrocketing like they are, but they stayed stable. He was able to stabilize prices. Now, that would be a broken promise because he said lower prices. But you could say, well, maybe voters would be fine with that because what they were really mad about was not just higher prices, but the prices rising time and time again. Even stability would be an improvement. But that's not what we're getting. We're getting the opposite of the Trump mandate. He said no cuts to social programs. That's what differentiated him from Haley and from Pence and from DeSantis and the people running in the primary that he basically ignored. Like, there was a primary that happened, remember? And he just ignored it and won easily. But all of those people were saying, well, no, we need to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. We need to cut those. They were, at least fair enough, honest about their desire to ruin working class lives. Trump just said, no, I don't believe in any of that, and then did it anyway. So the voters have not just been disappointed, but swindled. This is not Trump failing to meet promises. This is Trump kicking people in the teeth. But more than that, why the GOP will fail is that they've hooked themselves to the Trump train. There's no independent value of the GOP distinct from Trump. And so if Trump succeeded, fine, I guess, for them. But they can't, there's no charisma. There's no charisma to separate themselves from Trump. If Trump fails, they will fail because they are nothing without Trump any longer. The GOP doesn't exist. It's the Trump party.